Well, I was 42 years in sound post-production, and 37 of those as a dubbing mixer. And used to take about half a day to a week, depending upon whether it's a program, a corporate, or the size of the production, to actually do a sound dub. A 1 hour program would take about 2 days to mix, and probably half a day to do the narration, the voiceover record for. And my responsibility in those 37 years was to produce the final soundtrack that you would hear on television or you'd see on your corporate video or whatever it was. I thought I'd show you a little show reel of some of the programs I worked on during that period of time.
And I don't really fill my mind much with what one set of foreigners is doing to another. One has to say, what is it that's so dreadfully special about East Timor to the people here?
After an exhaustive briefing at the FCC, me skull was fuzzy with facts and figures. At these moments, I like to line the old stomach with some local fodder.
One of the interesting things about Chinese tucker, or food as we know it in Australia, is it generally consists of the kind of things your mum used to throw away.
One more turn, Dill.
Right. Now brace yourself, Rodney. Brace yourself.
Chalky, you alright, old boy? Do you want me to carry on?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay. I can't. Well, I mean, how can I carry on with him?
When our mothers and grandmothers burnt their brows way back in the 70s, what did this reveal?
Nothing at all for you, as far as I remember.
It revealed that at last women, the creators of life, the protectors of the young, the guardians of the future, were ready to assume the mantle of leadership.
Yeah.
The master stroke, however, was to insist on the changeover in traditional dress. Once the men had to wear the frocks, they were subjugated. As soon as we took their trousers away, they were putty in our hands.
Yeah.
After all, what did they have left?
2 lumps and a sponge finger.
Well, the first clip was Monty Python, and I was actually an assistant in those days, and the sound effect of the coin rolling was me rolling a coin across the top of the mixing desk we recorded, and then I used a BBC sound of a cash register, ching, and then I held the stylus on the edge of a record on my turntable, and it was going tick, 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 tick. Rod, who was a double mixer, put it all together, and that made the title sequence for that series of Monty Python, which was the last one. The second clip was Alan Clark, and that's taken from the programme called East Timor, Death of a Nation, made by a fantastic director, David Monroe and John Pilger. It actually was the most important programme that I ever dubbed, because at that time the Indonesians had killed 200,000 of the 600,000 people who lived in East Timor, and that was a programme that went around the world and actually stopped that happening. The next one was Celeste Peterson, the great Barry Humphries. It was quite funny. We needed the sound of a girl screaming, and I couldn't. I didn't have a sound effect anywhere that was useful for it. So I said to my assistants, "Can you just pop out in the street, see if you can find a young lady to come and do a scream, and then we'll pop it into the sound dub." They came back all sheepish. "No, we can't find anybody. We can't find anybody." And unfortunately, Inika, who was front of house for us, had gone home because her cat had just died, and she was very sad. So I went out of the studio, and as I got into the corridor that led down into the street, there was a very attractive Asian lady walking up the stairs. So I kind of bundled her into the studio, rushed her down to the voiceover. They said, "Would you mind screaming? Would you mind screaming? Oh, by the way, this is Barry Humphries, this is the director, this is the programme. Would you mind doing that?" Popped her in there. she was shaking. I think she thought I was abducting her. Anyway, she did a scream.
How about that?
Shot out of there like a frightened rabbit, but Barry Humphries did say, geez, you know how to find the right sort of lady for doing the right sort of job. So that was that one. Then Only Fools and Horses, you sort of look at everything, see what's coming up next before you actually start the sound mix and blending all the elements together. And that was just as funny to me as it was to the audience who saw it the first time. In fact, Ray Butt, who was the director of those, then said, Paul, obviously you don't get to see the whole show because you're only doing the film inserts, which are the stuff shot outside. I'll get you sent a script every week. So they arrived, and I used to sit in bed reading those at night, absolutely killing myself laughing. They said it was a very hard series programme to work on, Only Fools and Horses, because the whole of the crew and the whole of the cast were constantly laughing. It's really good fun. The last one of those, the Rick Stein. There was a Rick Stein that I played. Rick, I did the whole of the series for 25 years until I retired. And that was a clip from the very, very first one. And that was very special because having worked for 25 years with Rick and the fantastic producer Dave Pritchard, that means an awful lot to me. The last one is The Two Ronnies, the one that turned. I worked on The Two Ronnies from 1978 through to 1984 when I left London to work moved down here to work in Devon. And the one that turns probably the most well-known of all the clips that a series I worked on. And Ronnie Barker used to come of an evening, and it was just myself, my assistant Chris and Ronnie, and we used to sit there maybe from 6 o'clock in the evening through till 10:30 at night. Ronnie would bring a big bag full of all the sound effects that he had that he used to like to make, and at the first request that Chris, my assistant, would go out and buy some fish and chips for Ronnie, me and Chris, and Ronnie would always have a Wally, which was a gherkin, and very, very special. Ronnie was a really, really nice guy. Fantastic time. Anyway, behind me there you see a picture of the Helios mixing desk. Well, this mixing desk by today's standard is actually quite small, but in fact that little mixing desk worked on some incredible programs. It worked on The Goodies, Only Fools and Horses, The Two Ronnies, Last of Summer Wine, To the Man Born, The Dick Emery Show, Dave Anna at Large, Monty Python, Some Mothers Do Have 'Em, Terry and June, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Sorry, Rings on Their Fingers, so the comedy list goes on and on. Also World About Us, Chronicle, Arena, Horizon, Everyman, and dramas, Agatha Christie's, We'll Meet Again, The Dark Side of the Sun, Blood Money, and Black Beauty. Talking of Black Beauty, this takes me right back as it was the first programme I ever worked on in the beginning of 1974. And there I assisted my boss and doyen of the industry, Lou Hanks. And to prove I've always tried to be fashionable and failed. Like a lot of youngsters, I was a little shy and nervous around the larger-than-life characters that were involved in the film and television production. But one day an actor came in and he was so nervous. It was my job to sit him down in the voiceover booth, make sure the microphone was in the right place, give him a cup of coffee, and make sure he had water, so if his voice was a little bit croaky, he had something to drink on. And I found myself trying to comfort him as he was in a bit of a state. And it's at that point that I realised if that actor who was Sir Laurence Olivier was nervous, everybody is, so why worry about it? My rightful place as an assistant was at the Grams, and I had a 1/4-inch tape deck there, and 2 turntables and cassette decks. And the cassette decks we used to put backgrounds like Tweety Birds and stuff in to fill in when they were needed. But the BBC had produced about 8,000 sound effects discs, which were the size of a old-fashioned single, but ran at 33 1/3, and they had everything from laughter to cars to jets to all sorts of things like that. And they also had spot effects, bangs, crashes, door slams, gunshots. And as I got more and more experience, I could actually fire them in time and time again at exactly the right place using the footage counter that ran below the projection screen that we were all watching. And I could cue them into within a frame, which is bang on for sync. Now, talking of those BBC sound effects records, one day we were doing a landmark series with Rennie Cutthorpe doing the voiceover, and one of the programmes, he was an Air Commodore, came in, he flew a Nimrod in, or came in a Nimrod to Northfield Airport, landed there, and he came to the sound dub, and he was sitting in front of the mixing desk where people sat. Lou was at the back doing the mixing, and I was to one side, and there's a shot of a jet or plane taking off, and there was no sound for it, so I went out the back, and I hadn't got that particular plane, but I found one that I thought might do, so I put it on the turntable, and as the shot went through, I queued it up, it took off, and the Air Commodore stood up, and I thought, oops, here we go, and he turned around and he looked at me and he said, "It's nice to see you chappies putting the right sound over the right plane. Well done." Right, this is a picture of the actual the tape decks and the projector. They were 16mm. The film was 16mm with sprocket holes down the edge, and the way it kept in sync with the soundtrack, all the soundtracks were also 16mm magnetic tape with sprocket holes all the way down the edge, and they'd all run in sync together. Now you can see there was six sound heads there. There were 4 mono replay heads and 2 mono recorders. So you can tell from nowadays where people are literally mixing hundreds of tracks together to make a final soundtrack. You only had a maximum of 5 tracks you could play at the same time, mixing down to 1. So we made lots of premixes. So you do an effects premix, maybe a dialogue premix, maybe a music premix, and then those 3 would get put on, and then they would be combined to make the final soundtrack for the program. Because you're mixing as you go and everything has to be signed off, the studio was always full with the director, the editor, and anybody else who would like to hang on and come into the place. This shot was me as a young lad lacing up those machines, and you can see I actually had a tie on in those days, but my boss Lou said, "Paul, please don't wear a tie from now on, because if that tie gets caught in the cogs, you will get pulled through the machine and you'll become part of the film." In fact, here's some soundtracks from an original dub that I kept hold of. I don't know, just see if we can see them there. They're the 3 soundtracks. These were all Open All Hours. That's episode 3, the tracks 1, 2 and 3. And that's the cutting copy. That was the actual 60mm picture that ran on the projector. Well, by 1984 things have moved on, and there's a picture of the new mixing desk that I was actually, it was my desk. Lou by then had pulled right back from mixing, and I was the main mixer there. And with Lou, we designed and built this new studio for me in 1984, and it had a nice new Graham's area for my assistant to work in. So that's my new studio. The sound followers had really moved on by then. Those old ones were now replaced by these beauties here. They were all microprocessor controlled, which was quite a thing in 1984. Computers were still very, very young, and these were built by a German company called Perfecto. So having got this nice shiny new studio all for myself at the beginning of 1984, I saw an advert on the ACTT notice board, which was the Association of Television Technicians, and it said there was a job going for a dubbing mixer in Plymouth. Well, my mum and dad lived in Dartmouth. They'd been there since 1973, and my sister Rosie lived in Torcross. So I said again, well, things are going really well here, but shall I give it a go? She said, well, you've got nothing to lose, have you? So I thought, well, no, I haven't really. So I applied for the job, and there was an interview. I went to the interview, not really fussed whether I got the job or not. I finished the interview really fussed. I could see it was a fantastic place to work and be, and I would love to have worked there. I had to wait 3 weeks before I was told there was a short list of 3, and I was on it, and would I come back for a second interview. And I travelled all the way up with my mum and dad, who I'd told by then. I didn't tell them originally because they would have been too excited wanting me to live down here. And I got the job. Well, Here's a shot to prove just how hard we worked at TSW. Well, actually, we did work very hard, to be honest, but we also had quite a good time. And there's me, the film editor Jim Dewan, and Chris Overton, the assistant film editor, and my mate John McGuff, who was the sound recordist, and we were dubbing a programme about World War II, and we decided we'd get dressed up while we were dubbing it. I'm actually wearing my dad's flying suit, because he was a pilot. He trained in the Second World War, and every now and then, if I got a chance, I was allowed to put it on. Well, in 1989, TSW got the first fully digital sound studio on the planet, and I was the lucky boy to be the recipient. Now, unfortunately, one of the main reasons why they got stereo, got this new kit and various other things, is that the franchises were all coming up, and in their bid to prove what a good station they were spending money getting all these new things. But TSW unfortunately failed, and I lost my job. With nothing else much happening in the West Country, I had to think of something to do, and I managed to get this studio at a good price from TSW, and I sold it to a company in London called Nats. Well, I worked at Nats for just over a year, and then I basically had enough, and I decided to go freelance. And with a friend of mine called Rob Butler Biggs, we started building some studios in London, and this is the main studio, and we called it Fitzrovia Post Production. So from this one studio, we ended up with 3 studios in the West End, and Gaynor and I then moved out to Tremwell Farm in South Milton, and we bought one of these studios down, and we put it in a cottage in Devon and worked it from there. Well, that's the studio that you saw just now in London, and now it's in South Milton in Devon, and them London folks used to come down and see us buggers down here instead, which was lovely. Well, in 2006 we moved from Tramwell to Gaston, and I put a new studio in, and this is it here. This is the final studio that I used to work with. So a little recap. This is how it was all done. The sound was done in 1984, and this is how it was all done from 2006 onwards. This is how the mixing desk looked in 1984, and this is how the mixing desk looked from 2006, and it still is to this day. And in fact, the mixing desk you can see behind me there is basically just a big giant computer mouse, and the controls on the mixing desk work the controls within the computer. Now, in the olden days, every time I worked on a television series, the directors or producers would like to say that it's coming up, and they used to send these cards out. In fact, I was involved on the BBC's last ever one that was sent out for the corporation, because it was a programme I did called Sex and Stopping, and inside it, I'm not quite sure where this one's gone, but it did actually have inside it had a condom, and when it was sent out to the press, there was a lot of complaints that the BBC had been spending an awful lot of money sending condoms out when they should be making programmes. In fact, the silly thing was that the condom, I think it might have been supplied by Virgin or something like that. It was given to them for free, so it didn't cost them anything. But that was it. End of these cards being sent out. I just thought I'd like to show you this photo, because it's me with Dave Pritchard and Orazu Farazad and Rick in the little voiceover booth in the background there. Dave was a very special man. He produced and created Keith Floyd. He made and created Rick Stein, and he did the Antonio Coluccio programs, and he was a total genius. I'd never worked with anybody like David at all in my entire career. Of all many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of flipping directors I worked with, David was above them all. Right, and this is a typical example of Dave's directing, where he's taken a bad situation and made it very funny. It's also special because Rick's dog Chalky actually never ever made a sound, and all the growls and whimpers and barks and growls that he did, I'd pop in, and Orizu and I would have a great time making Chalky talk. I think the one that always made me laugh the most, and I had to take it down a level, was when Rick Stein met Prince Charles, and Prince Charles leant down and went to pat Chalky and said, this is Chalky, and as he went down to pat him, I just put a little over the soundtrack, which made us all laugh, but it was left in, but I had to make it quieter than I originally put it in. Anyway, this is a clip from one of the Rick Steins with Chalky's Chalky talking.
corner of the ramparts here is the tower that captivated my imagination all those years ago. The brooding tower of the salted Burgundians. So I thought it appropriate to send a little historical video postcard to Chalky and the boys back in Cornwall. Finally, it was overrun overnight by Charles VII and a troop from sorry. Okay. Aigues Moor was occupied by the Duke of Burgundy and his troops. They lived here for about 2 years, but were overrun overnight by Charles VII and a troop from, I can't get it right.
They came from Armagnac, didn't they?
They did.
And they did it overnight.
Yeah. And, sorry. I just think Simon Sharma. I know you're getting despair in me, but I believe I can do it. Okay? Now, I think that's a fantastic story, and I can't remember how to finish it. So what did the wily locals do? They took Mediterranean sea salt and layered the bodies with salt in this town here. Town? I'm hopeless as this. It's stupid. So, forevermore, this has been known as the Tower of the Salted Burgundians.
Right, I'd now like to play you 2 clips of a programme undubbed, and or a section of a programme undubbed, and a clip of it when it was finished. It was called, the big long title is The Man-Eating Leopard of Rudraprayag, and basically, very appropriate for now, it was the Spanish flu pandemic of 1919, and I think it was something like 2 million people had died, I don't know, but in India they'd been decimated and they were throwing the corpses into ravines and all sorts of places, and a leopard had found a taste for man flesh from these corpses, and he started terrorising all the local villages, and a guy called Corbin was sent in to track him down and shoot him. And this is an early clip from the programme, as I say, undubbed and then dubbed. And now dubbed. Right, and another clip. This was from a Raymond Briggs animation. Raymond Briggs, who did the Snowman and the Snow Dog, and I worked on one called Ivor the Invisible. And by the time I worked on this, I mean, I had about 60,000 different sound effects on the system, so I could just pull up sounds whenever I needed them and pop them and make them. But also you had to create them for yourself all the time as well. So I think the neighbours would get very confused if they were looking and seeing me rolling around the garden, thumping around, making sound effects of various animated creatures. The final dub for this was a bit of a shame because I had a stinking cold on the day when I was mixing, which is not good for a dub mix because your ears tend to get blocked up. Also, the director and producer was sitting, well, were supposed to be sitting in the room with me listening to it all go through as I was mixing it in surround, vanished and never came back the entire day because it was 9/11 and they were more interested in watching that. So I dubbed this programme in total ignorance of what was going on in the world at the time, but nonetheless, here it is. This is a track lay of Ivor the Invisible.
I really like that. Hey, what?
You again. I knew you were a villain. What are you doing to my ducks?
Nothing. It bumped into me.
Oh, yeah. Of course it did. We get complaints every day. Flying ducks bumping into people. What? Get off!
And this next clip is another track lay I was really fond of. Well, I did a series called Hump for King Rollo Films, another animation. and one of the characters starts shivering, called Wallace, and of course they needed the sound effect. I needed the sound effect of his teeth chattering, so I recorded my teeth and sped them up, and this is the clip from that.
And Wallace kept on splashing in the water. But then his teeth started making a funny noise.
Right, for all the time I was dubbing, there was always one question I was constantly being asked, maybe once, maybe even twice a week sometimes. Why does the music have to be so loud? Why do the effects have to be so loud underneath the dialogue or the narration? And there was a very simple answer, really, because it's been mixed badly, and it shouldn't be like that. I tried, not always succeeded, I tried to have 3 different defaults, one for children's programs where the kids can hear everything, so you can really mix everything reasonably tight and close together. One was for everyday viewing for families where you'd be sort of kinder, and one was for programs that were going to be predominantly watched by older folks, so we'd make the sound effects really, really much quieter and the music much quieter underneath the dialogue, so you could hear them a lot better. Anyway, this is the last photos I want to show you. It's me with my friend John Lovelace and also John Nettles. We worked together a lot over the years, and they phoned up and said, could I do a voiceover? And I said, well, of course I can. And they said, well, how much? And I said, well, the price of a photo. It'll be fine, because it's the last thing I'm ever going to do in my studio before I rip it out. And this is the very last photo. The camera was on automatic, went click, 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 and it was still clicking away as I was walking up to switch it off. And this is what I'm most fond of, a fitting way to finish a great career.